Chapter 7. Dawn broke unevenly through the overgrowth, cutting fragmented beams of light across the abandoned streets of Savannah. The city was quiet here, not the deceptive quiet of last night, but a thick, cautious silence, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Matthew led the family through back alleys, the occasional sound of the distant city reminding them it still lived and died without care for anyone. His sunglasses were back in place, though the dim morning made them almost redundant. Pain still throbbed behind his eyes, a constant companion, but the sensory map he had built over weeks of survival allowed him to navigate by sound, smell, and memory alone. Thor walked beside him, now steady on all fours, tail low but wagging occasionally when Matthew's hand brushed his fur. The dog's recovery was slow, but it gave the family hope they had learned not to expect. Whitley followed closely, carrying Lilith in a makeshift sling. Saoirse, Morrigan, Matthew Jr., and Raymond fell in line behind, with Dana supporting Evan. The group moved with careful efficiency. Even the children had learned the rhythm of survival. Morrigan's small hand tapped a silent pattern against Saoirse's back, guiding them through unseen obstacles, a code she had perfected. They paused at the corner of an abandoned grocery store. Broken windows reflected jagged slices of sunlight. Matthew's staff tapped on the asphalt. A faint echo confirmed the street was clear. No infected in immediate vicinity, no human movement either. "We need supplies," Matthew whispered, scanning the ruined storefronts. "Food, water, anything we can carry." Carl moved forward cautiously, flashlight in hand, and started checking a boarded-up convenience store. "Cans," he muttered. "Not much, but enough for a few days." As they gathered provisions, the faint whir of engines carried over the rooftops. Matthew froze. Every muscle tensed. The sound was mechanical but irregular, too patterned to be a vehicle, too erratic to be a helicopter. He held up his hand. "Quiet, all of you." From the shadows a figure emerged, another survivor, young, wiry, holding a shotgun loosely at their side. A mask of dirt streaked across their face. Their eyes flicked to Matthew and his family, calculating. "Hold it," the stranger called, voice trembling. "I don't want trouble, just help." Matthew studied the sound of their breathing, the way their boots scraped the cracked pavement. They were unbitten, afraid, and alone. A survivor, yes, but desperate enough to be dangerous. "What do you want?" Matthew asked slowly. "Safe place," the stranger said. "I've been moving through the city since the outbreak. I don't have anyone. I can carry my own weight." Matthew's gaze swept the group behind him. Dana's eyes widened at the newcomer. Evan shifted uncomfortably. Saoirse clutched her sister closer. Whitley whispered, "Do we risk it?" Matthew tilted his head, listening carefully to the city beyond the alleys, the distant groans of the dead, the hum of the military camp, the subtle shuffle of scavengers. Any misstep could draw attention. Any miscalculation could end them all. Finally, he nodded. "One of you, no more. Move forward slowly, hands visible. Keep your gun ready, but don't fire unless I say." The stranger's relief was audible. They moved forward, careful, deliberate. Matthew didn't relax. He never relaxed. As the group consolidated, Matthew surveyed the path ahead. Supplies in hand, a wounded dog resting on a dolly, and two newcomers now with them. It was a fragile coalition, a family stretched beyond its original bounds. He knew what had to be done next. "We moved to the west side of the city," Matthew said, voice low but firm. "There's a building, a former police precinct, concrete walls, reinforced doors, might be defensible." Carl frowned. "Occupied?" "No," Matthew said. "Abandoned, last I could hear, but it's near enough to the river to keep an escape route, and high enough to see anyone coming." The group nodded. The plan was risky, exposed, potentially deadly, but staying here meant eventual discovery. Matthew had learned that lesson too many times. Thor barked softly, echoing Matthew's own resolve. Matthew inhaled sharply. "We move quickly, quietly, and if we're spotted, we survive first, protect the family second. Nothing else matters." A sudden crash echoed from a nearby building. Infected, drawn by something. A low moan rose from the alley behind them, mixing with a sharp, metallic clang. Matthew raised his staff and checked his weapons. Whitley steadied the children. Dana and Evan flinched but stayed in line. The first attack of the morning came without warning. Matthew gritted his teeth. Survival had never been quiet, and it would never be simple. The crash came again, closer this time. Glass shattered somewhere behind the grocery store, followed by the unmistakable scrape of dead weight dragging across tile. Matthew didn't turn. He didn't need to. The sound told him everything. One infected, maybe two, clumsy and hungry, reacting to noise rather than sight. Clockwise, he whispered, slow. They moved as one. Carl and the newcomer, who had finally said their name was Riley, took the outer edge, weapons ready but low. Whitley guided the children inward, her free hand resting near the grip of her pistol. Dana pulled Evan along, jaw tight, eyes wide. Thor limped but stayed close to Matthew's left leg, growling softly. Matthew counted steps, 4, 6, 8. The moan sharpened into a wet gurgle as the infected stumbled out of the storefront behind them. Matthew angled his head. One set of feet, no echo overlap. One, he said quietly, alone. It rushed blindly, drawn by the shuffle of movement and the faint clink of gear. Matthew pivoted. The wooden staff snapped forward with practiced precision, cracking against bone. He felt the impact reverberate up his arms. The infected fell, but didn't stop. Head, Whitley hissed. Matthew adjusted, bringing the staff down hard. The skull gave with a dull, hollow sound. The body went still. No scream, no gunshot. Clean. But the city heard it anyway. From down the block came answering moans. Several this time. Scattered, not clustered. Wandering dead pulled by chance rather than command. Move, Matthew said. Now. They pushed west, cutting through alleys and half-collapsed courtyards. The morning sun climbed higher, filtering through broken awnings and tangled wires. Each patch of light stabbed Matthew's eyes, even through the sunglasses. Pain flared white-hot behind his temples. He ignored it. Pain was information. And information kept you alive. They reached a narrow street lined with row houses, many boarded, some burned. Matthew stopped abruptly, raising a hand. Wait! What is it? Carl whispered. Matthew tilted his head, listening past the dead, past the wind. Footsteps, human, maybe 3. Running, not chasing. Get down, Matthew said. They pressed into the shadows as 3 figures sprinted past the far end of the street, panic in every step. Gunfire erupted seconds later, sharp and uncontrolled. Screams followed, then silence. The infected surged in response, a rising chorus of moans rolling like a tide. Matthew swallowed. That's what noise buys you, he murmured. They moved again, faster now, the pressure building with every block. Evan gasped in pain but kept silent, teeth clenched. Dana whispered encouragement through tears she didn't have time to shed. Then it happened. Raymond tripped. It was small, a crack in the sidewalk, barely visible, but it was enough. He fell forward, hitting the pavement hard. The cry ripped out of him before anyone could stop it. Matthew's heart slammed. The dead answered immediately, from multiple directions. Up, Whitley said sharply, hauling Raymond into her arms. Too late. Footsteps dragged closer, moans overlapped, converging. Contact in 20 seconds, Matthew said, already moving. We need cover. There, Riley pointed. That brick building, fire escape. Matthew listened. Solid walls, hollow interior, metal stairs. Go, he said. Carl, rear guard. The first infected appeared at the end of the street, shambling but fast enough. Matthew stepped forward, staff raised, rifle slung across his back. Thor lunged unexpectedly, snarling, throwing himself at the legs of the nearest corpse. The infected stumbled, buying seconds. Thor! Matthew shouted. The dog retreated immediately, limping back, but the damage was done. Noise, motion, attention. They reached the building just as more dead poured into the street. Carl fired once, clean, controlled. A skull popped. The echo was brutal. Matthew winced. Inside, he barked. They slammed the door shut behind them, barricading it with whatever they could find. The infected hit moments later, bodies thudding against brick and metal, claws scraping uselessly. Inside, the stairwell echoed with breath and fear. The group collapsed against the walls, shaking. Raymond sobbed quietly into Whitley's shoulder. Morrigan covered her ears, rocking gently. Saoirse stared at the door, unblinking. Matthew leaned heavily on his staff, chest tight, not from fear, but from the realization settling into his bones. This city was waking up, and it would not let them pass unnoticed again. He lifted his head, listening to the dead pounding below, to the sound of the living breathing around him. We don't stop moving after this, Matthew said quietly. No more supply runs, no more delays. Whitley met his gaze. Then what? Matthew's voice was steady, resolute. Then we leave Savannah. Outside, the dead kept knocking, and the road ahead was about to get much longer. The pounding below didn't stop. It became rhythm. Meat against metal, bone against brick, steady enough that Matthew could count it. 12, 13, 14 bodies, maybe more, clustering at the base of the stairwell door. Not enough to break it yet, but enough to keep them pinned. Second floor, Matthew said quietly. Up. They moved, slow and controlled, boots and bare feet whispering on concrete steps. Every sound echoed too loudly. Matthew felt it in his chest, each footfall a ripple he couldn't take back. The second floor opened into an old office space, cubicles gutted, ceiling tiles hanging like broken teeth. Sunlight slanted in through shattered windows, diffused by dust. Matthew turned his face away instinctively, jaw tightening as the light burned. He forced himself forward anyway. Barricade the stairs, he said. Light. Quick. Carl and Riley dragged the filing cabinet and tipped it onto its side. Diana shoved a desk against it, breath coming in sharp bursts. The children huddled near an interior wall while Whitley checked the windows, counting, memorizing. 2 exits, she whispered. Fire escape and the stairwell we came up. Matthew nodded. Fire escape is last resort. Below them, the pounding intensified. Metal shrieked. The door at the bottom of the stairwell bowed inward. They'll get through, Riley said, voice shaking. Eventually, Matthew agreed. Not fast. He knelt beside Morrigan, lowering his voice. I need you to listen for me. She nodded immediately, eyes focused, serious. Tell me when the sounds change, he said, when they stop pushing and start spreading. She closed her eyes, tilting her head just like he did. Seconds stretched. Then, they're turning, she whispered. Some are leaving. Matthew exhaled slowly. Good. Noise dilution, he said softly. Something else caught their attention. Gunfire echoed in the distance. Short bursts, panicked. Someone else had made a worse choice. Matthew rose. This is our chance. They moved to the windows carefully. From here, Matthew could hear the street better, infected drifting away, drawn toward new sound. A few remained below, restless but unfocused. Carl leaned close. We still going for the precinct? Matthew listened again, longer this time. No, he said finally. Too exposed now. They'll fortify it or burn it. Whitley's jaw tightened. Then where? Matthew turned his head toward the river, toward the hum of engines and the distant chaos. We go where no one wants to be, he said. Which is? Industrial dead zones. Rail yards, old freight terminals. Carl grimaced. That's a maze. Matthew allowed himself a thin smile. Yes. They descended the fire escape one at a time, careful not to rattle the rusted metal. Thor went first, surprisingly quiet despite his injury. Matthew followed, counting each rung, memorizing the way the structure vibrated under weight. When his boots hit the ground, he paused, listened. Clear. They moved fast now, cutting through back routes, slipping between warehouses and overgrown lots. The sun climbed higher, the light harsher. Matthew's head pounded, vision blurring at the edges despite the sunglasses. He staggered once. Whitley caught his arm instantly. You're pushing too hard. I can manage, he said through clenched teeth. Matthew. He stopped, listened inward this time, to the ringing in his ears, the nausea creeping up. He nodded once. 5 minutes. They ducked into the shade of a collapsed loading dock. The city groaned around them, alive with distant death and human desperation. As they rested, Matthew heard something else. Not infected, not military. Footsteps. Careful, measured. He raised a hand. From behind a rusted boxcar emerged 3 figures, armed, alert, organized. Not panicked, not alone. One of them spoke. You're not military, the man said, and you're not dead. Matthew straightened, staff in hand. Neither are you, he replied. The man nodded slowly. Name's Harris. We run supply lines along the rail. We don't take families. He glanced at the children, then at Matthew. But we don't leave them to the dead either. The offer hung in the air, dangerous, uncertain, necessary. Matthew felt the weight of every choice pressing down on him. He looked at Whitley, at the kids, at Thor, then back at Harris. Then talk fast, Matthew said, because the city is getting loud, and for the first time since Savannah fell, Matthew faced something more dangerous than the dead, other survivors with plans of their own. Harris didn't lower his weapon. That told Matthew everything. Not fear, not aggression, caution sharpened by experience. Behind Harris, the other 2 watched the perimeter instead of the conversation. One knelt, scanning the street beyond the rail yard with binoculars. The other stood near the boxcar door, hand resting near a machete scarred with old rust and darker stains. Professionals, or as close as the end of the world allowed. Matthew shifted his stance slightly, staff grounded, rifle still slung but accessible. He angled his body so he stood half a step in front of Whitley without touching her. She noticed anyway, always did. "You said supply lines," Matthew said. "That means movement. Movement means noise." Harris nodded once. "And noise means bait. We plan around it." Morrigan's fingers tightened in Whitley's sleeve. Matthew heard it. "How many?" Matthew asked. "8 total," Harris replied. "Split cells. No fixed camp. Rail corridors only." Carl muttered under his breath, "Smart." Harris's eyes flicked to him, smart enough to still be breathing. A distant moan echoed down the tracks, followed by another. Not close yet, but drifting. Matthew tilted his head, mapping the sound through the steel and concrete. "You're heading south," Matthew said. Harris raised an eyebrow. "How do you—" "Rail lines bend," Matthew interrupted. "Sound carries farther that way. You've been drawing them off your back trail." Harris smiled grimly. "Yeah, you're different." Matthew didn't respond. Different didn't mean safe. "We don't split families," Matthew said flatly. "Ever." Harris hesitated. That was new. Then he sighed. "Didn't think you would." The man with the machete shifted his weight. "Harris." "I know," Harris said quietly. Then to Matthew, "Here's the truth. We can get you out of the city limits by nightfall. Quiet routes, covered stretches. But after that, you're on your own." Whitley spoke for the first time. "Why help us at all?" Harris met her eyes. "Because I left a family behind once thinking I was making the smart call." Silence fell heavy. Matthew listened to Harris's breathing. Steady, controlled, but underneath, regret, real. The moans down the tracks grew louder. Matthew made his decision. "We move together," he said. "Your route, my pace. If things go bad, my family moves first." Harris nodded immediately. No argument. "That works." They merged formations quickly. Harris's group took point and rear. Matthew stayed central, near the kids, staff in hand, Thor pressed against his leg like a shadow. The rail yard was a graveyard of industry, rusted boxcars, twisted rails, weeds reclaiming steel. The ground vibrated faintly underfoot, sound traveling unpredictably through metal and hollow spaces. Matthew hated it. Too many echoes, too many blind spots. He relied on Morrigan. "Tell me," he whispered. She squeezed his hand once when something changed. An echo too sharp, a footstep out of rhythm, the hollow sound of a boxcar being bumped. They moved around it. Halfway through the yard, a scream rang out, far off but sharp. Harris swore softly. Someone tripped a nest. The infected responded immediately. Not a wave, a flood. The sound rolled toward them, dozens of bodies drawn through the rails like water through channels. "Run?" Dana whispered. Matthew shook his head. "Running scatters sound." He raised his voice just enough. "Harris, where's your noise point?" Harris pointed without hesitation. "Red tanker, 2 rows east." Matthew nodded. "Trigger it." Harris barked an order. A flare hissed to life and arced through the air, clattering loudly against the tanker's steel side. The sound was immense. The dead turned as one. The pressure eased, but not enough. "They're splitting," Carl warned. Matthew heard it too. Too many, too close. "Vertical," Matthew said. "Now." They scrambled onto a low flatbed car, then another. Hands lifted children. Thor leapt, landing hard but staying upright. Evan cried out as pain flared, but Dana dragged him onward. An infected clawed its way up the side. Matthew stepped forward and brought the axe down. Once, twice. The body fell, taking another with it. Gunfire cracked, controlled but unavoidable. More moans answered. They reached the far edge of the yard as the dead swarmed behind them, distracted but relentless. Harris slammed a gate shut behind the last of them, chaining it fast. The infected piled against it seconds later. Breathing hard, the group pressed on into the trees beyond the tracks. Matthew slowed only when the sound fell behind them, only when the city's voice dulled again. They stopped in a shallow ravine, hidden by brush and shadow. Everyone shook. Everyone lived. Matthew leaned heavily on his staff, sweat cold on his skin, head pounding from light and strain. Whitley touched his arm. "You okay?" He nodded once. "I will be." Harris looked at him with something close to respect. "You lead by listening." Matthew didn't smile. "I lead by surviving," he said. Behind them, Savannah burned louder with every passing hour. Ahead lay woods, rail corridors, and a country unraveling.